As my former police chief used to say, that's a clue. Now, there's not a business in this audience that would have much of a long-term strategy if you only had a domestic plan for growth. And the reality, if you're going to be competitive, if you're going to grow, you're going to continue to gain market share, you're going to have to be involved in the global marketplace. For America's workers to prosper, we must have access to markets around the world. We have to have the ability to sell our goods, our services, our intellectual property to consumers all around the world, wherever they may be. And when American businesses have access to those markets, it's good for all of us. I believe it's just that simple. Now, the good news is there are businesses all over the U.S. that are beginning to understand this challenge and taking advantage of the opportunity to be involved in exporting around the world. And the rewards of their work, I don't believe, can be underestimated. Service firms that make the leap to the international marketplace are much more likely to grow faster, hire more workers, and in many cases, you're going to pay those workers anywhere from 10 to 18% higher than the national average. Our mission at USTR is to engage you and work with you to make sure that you have access to those growth opportunities in markets around the world. But first things first, we have to do some basic work within USTR and the federal government to make sure that we understand who our customers are. One of my surprises when I came into office is, one, I just wanted to understand the universe of what we were doing. How big is the market? How large are the opportunities? Try to get a clearer picture of who our exporters look like. And other than that 95% number that jumped out at me, the other number that really kind of keeps me awake and has me turning, thinking, how do we understand this better, is one that's equally powerful, and that's almost 97% of our export base of U.S. exporters are what we define as small to medium-sized businesses. But yet they make up less than 30% of our exports. And the reality is we just don't know a lot about what that universe is. Now, my intuitive sense, many of them probably are represented by some form of fashion within your industry. But rather than being intuitive, we're trying to take a more thoughtful approach. So last week, we engaged the United States International Trade Commission to ask them to just do some basic data mining for us to help us better understand who our partners are. We know what the raw numbers are, but we don't know what the makeup is. We don't know what the split is between businesses that are 500 or 20 and how much are local. And if they're exporting, are they principally just exporting, you know, within the NAFTA region? But once we are empowered by that information, then we've got a task force we've set up within USTR to really look at that and see what we can do to, first of all, better incorporate them into our knowledge base at USTR and how we can work more effectively to help them grow and take advantages that are available to them through the global marketplace. And we'll use the outcome of these studies to target our efforts so that we may do a better job of representing you. This does not mean that we're taking any less of an aggressive approach to continuing to open up markets for that 3% of our export basis that obviously dominates 70% of the market. But we do think, in concert with the President's overall economic mission to get this economy turned around and put Americans back to work, an easy place to start is doing a better job of working with small to medium-sized businesses that tend to be local, that tend to make those hires and put those jobs back into the communities. Now, while we wait those results, we know there are a few basic other steps that we can take to help create a more dynamic services trade. First are open and competitive markets and transparent trade policies and effective rules that apply equally to American companies as well as our foreign competitors. In order to create new service jobs here at home, we must have trade agreements that enable American companies to meet global demand for both good and services, and increasingly those services go hand in hand. One of the reasons we believe for the success of the iPhone and MP3 players and GPS devices is that they became such a great success because we were able to combine that great hardware with the seamless set of services that goes along with them. And we can help more American companies capitalize on the synergy of goods and services by pursuing a global consensus on the growing importance of services trade and the accompanying need for fair, effective regulation. If given the opportunity, President Obama and I believe that American entrepreneurs are ready to reach any market in the world and can compete in any market in the world if given a level playing field. But the sad reality is that in too many of these markets, there are still too many non-tariffed areas and too many doors are closed to American service providers. And that's not to say we haven't made good progress, because we have. But those of you in this room still know how many barriers, how many regulations, how many off-the-book practices that are in place that exist, frankly, to keep America's more aggressive service providers out of those markets, and we think distort that market unfavorably in terms of other domestic providers. And some of the largest emerging markets in the world are still walled off to services trade by regulations that outright restrict foreign competition and tilt the playing field. Often these policies are unwritten and unspoken, but they have the same effect of locking us out of those markets, and that practice has to stop. And that's one of the constant themes of our conversations with my colleagues from around the world. We're taking concrete steps to address these barriers at every opportunity we can, because we fundamentally believe and understand that a robust trade policy is not only good for America, but ultimately it's going to be good for the world as those countries begin to nurture their entrepreneurs and service markets as well. Access to efficient infrastructure services is a key ingredient in economic development for some of the world's poorest nations and a critical component of continued growth in the world's most developed states. But it also can be a boon to some of the world's poorest farmers and residents. For example, the ability of millions of farmers around the world, particularly in some of the least developed countries, to access market new mobile networks or to access capital through enhanced financial services is helping to bring new efficiency and productivity to the agricultural sector and transforming millions of lives around the world. And to that end, we will continue to work to create opportunities in the services trade through a number of fora. First and foremost, and we believe one of the most critical areas that we can make a lasting impression and a strong impression on opening up trade for the next century is through a successful conclusion to the Doha round of talks. Now, principally thus far, the negotiations in Doha have almost obsessively centered on agriculture and what we call non-agriculture manufacturing. But we believe that the biggest gains to the global economy are likely to derive from the multilateral services liberalization. And the offers on the table right now, frankly, in the services sector just aren't there. We really have only just begun to engage in serious negotiations about that. But President Obama and the world's leaders once again committed in Pittsburgh to a successful outcome of the Doha round of talks. We have been engaged in multilateral discussions and discussions at the WTO and bilateral discussions with our trading partners. And our office and our team at USTR is firmly committed to carrying forward the President's pledge that putting Doha on a sure path to success is not only the right thing to do for the poorest countries in the world, but it's the right thing to do for the world's economy. But it isn't going to happen unless all of the parties come to the table and engaged in honest and tough negotiations across all of the elements contained in Doha, not only agriculture and NAMA, but in rules and services alone. And we are firmly of the mind that one of the ways to help Doha close the gaps and help all of the countries find that market access meaningful that we're looking for is through a robust negotiations on a thoughtful services policy, which would result in meaningful new market opportunities. If we can do that, we believe that a positive outcome is achievable, and we will continue to work with our partners to press that case and put new ideas on the table. And we welcome your thoughts, in particular from this industry, on some of the hurdles that you face and some of the opportunities we see as we continue to engage in those discussions.